Good afternoon, everyone. This is the October meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission. Welcome. We have one member, I believe, on Teams and 4 of us in attendance, so we have a quorum. I'll run the roll call if everybody's ready. Mr. Ballard.
Present.
Mr. Shoemaker. Ron Lancaster. I am present. Mr. Hopkins.
Present.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Jared Smith.
Present.
Tom LeClaire. Not present. Ex officios, Mr. Wasson.
Present.
Ms. Klopfenstein.
Present.
Miranda Carson.
Present.
Alyssa Taysom.
Present.
Justin Price.
Present.
Sergeant Smith.
Present.
Tricia Murray.
I'm here online.
Heather Hill is here and Caleb Hood is here. Welcome all.
Mr. Steed,
Yes.
I appreciate you counting Miranda Carson. She'll appreciate that joke from a meeting ago.
Okay.
Well, she didn't say anything, but she gets the point.
Okay. All right. The next item is the adoption of the agenda. Chair will stand for a motion.
To approve the agenda.
Mr. Ballard.
Second.
Second was Mr. Hopkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next item is the approval of the minutes of August 5. Our September meeting was held off-site. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Meridian PD again for very informative morning about crash reconstruction. But our last official meeting in this room was on August 5. Chair will entertain a motion for approval or proposed changes or comments.
Move to approve.
Motion from Mr. Ballard.
Second.
Mr. Hopkins seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Minutes are approved. Old business is the transportation project updates. Ms. Hill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So transportation project updates start on page 6 of your packet and go through page 13. There's several updates provided in bold, but nothing really significant from when we met in August. I did reach out to ITD and exchanged emails with Mark Wasdall, and he's going to get me some updates for the November Transportation Commission meeting for next month. So if you have any questions on any of the updates in there, I can stand for questions.
Mr. Lancaster, welcome.
Present.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Hill on any of the items in the packet? Okay, that is approved. Next item is the traffic impact study overview by Mindy Wallace from ACHD. Welcome, ma'am, and if you'll come to the podium.
She get 5 minutes. Tell us who she-
Mindy Wallace, ACHD.
Yeah.
Mr. Ballard would like a little more information than your name and place. Let's go that route. Pull that mic up closer to you and
Are you all ready?
There you go. We are very ready. Thank you, ma'am.
So my name is Mindy Wallace, and I'm the Planning Review Supervisor at the Ada County Highway District. So I am here to talk to you about traffic impact studies and just provide you with kind of a brief overview of what those look like for new development. And I will share a little bit about myself. I am not an engineer, but as a planner at the Highway District, I have been reviewing and working with traffic impact studies since I began my career there in 2006. My group works on current planning applications, so we work directly with Bill Parsons' group here at the city of Meridian. And I live in Meridian with my husband, and my daughter attends Mountain View High School.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. So as I already mentioned, I wanted to provide you with a brief high-level overview of the traffic impact study process for new development. So for that, we're going to talk a little about the purpose of a study and how it's defined in ACHD policy, the process for when a study is required and how we determine the scope of work, the analysis and the scenarios that should be included, findings and mitigation based on the analysis, and then how we use that information. So ACHD's traffic impact study policy is under section 7106 of our policy manual. It includes requirements and details and specifications to be used in the analysis, and it also defines the purpose of a traffic study as defined per ITE's definition, and that's before you on the slide. For process for a traffic impact study generally begins by determining whether or not a study is required for a particular development. Our policy notes that a traffic impact study should generally be required for a new development that's going to generate 100 new trips in the PM peak hour. This is the guidance that we generally use. However, ITD and land use agencies can also require a traffic impact study, even if it's not required by ACHD. And ACHD doesn't always require a full traffic study, but maybe a variation on a traffic study depending on the location of the site and what's proposed. For example, like a coffee shop on Fairview Avenue, for example, we reviewed a proposal for a coffee shop that's directly next to a fast lube oil change. So instead of a full traffic study, we asked for a queuing analysis so we could make sure that we wouldn't have vehicles queuing on Fairview while they were waiting to access either the coffee shop or the oil facility. So after it's determined that a traffic study is required, then the applicant's consultant will begin work on a scope of work to present to us at ACHD. The scope is usually determined through a model Compass run, and the applicant's engineer will reach out to Compass directly and provide them with general information regarding the proposed development, such as the location, what the actual proposal is, if it's residential, the number of units, if it's commercial, the amount of square footage, the anticipated build out of the development, and then usually a site plan is provided. Compass prepares the model run and sends it directly to ACHD, and we review it to determine where the site-generated traffic is 10% or more of the total traffic in an intersection or roadway segment. So this is an example for a multifamily project in North Meridian. It was Bridge Tower Apartments, I believe. And the description at the top is directly from Compass based on that feedback from the applicant's engineer. And they provide us with the map on the left, which shows us where the development's located and the collector and arterial network. And then the image on the right, the dark navy blue, shows us where the site generated traffic is more than 10% of the total traffic. So that's generally the area we would ask them to include in the analysis. ACHD then responds back to Compass with a list of intersections and roadway segments to be included, and that information is provided to the applicant's engineer. And then they work on providing ACHD with a written scope of work. And then we review and approve the scope before they start the analysis. For the analysis portion of the study, ACHD policy requires that existing conditions, background conditions, and total traffic conditions or a cumulative analysis be included for the intersections and roadways included in the scoping memo. And the analysis tells us if those intersections or roadways will meet ACHD's acceptable level of service planning thresholds or exceed them, and under which scenarios. The traffic study reports the findings of the analysis and tells us if mitigation is required for facilities to operate acceptably. And if the mitigation is required, we expect that it be a feasible mitigation. After ACHD's completed the review and accepted the study, we then report the findings of the study in our staff reports, and that will include mitigation recommendations for new development projects. And then those reports are then provided directly to the land use agencies for their decision makers' consideration. So that is a very high level overview of the process, and I'll stand for any questions.
Questions, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Lancaster.
back and itching with questions.
I'm glad to see you here, sir.
I decided to sit on this side this time because it looked a little lonely over here. But my question, Ms. Wallace, is, so you gave level of service thresholds. What do you do when those are exceeded? Or when those facilities' existing conditions are exceeded, which I imagine is becoming more and more common, right?
Chairman and Commissioner Lancaster, you are absolutely correct. It is more and more common. So, and it depends. Every situation is going to be different. So maybe we have a roadway segment that exceeds in its current configuration today, but it's programmed for improvements. In that case, we would say it's programmed for improvements. Depending on a couple other scenarios, you're less than 10% of the total traffic, or we have limited right-of-way. Maybe there's no feasible mitigation. We also have roadway segments that are completely built out consistent with our master street map, 10 Mile, for example. So under that scenario, we have a policy that says if a roadway is completely built out consistent with the master street map, then no mitigation is required. And there's just going to be a higher level of congestion on certain roadway segments.
If I may interrupt.
Yeah.
You in your next question and ask a question on the answer. If the roadway is built out to the master plan and something's going to be added that will exceed that, they're allowed to do it anyway?
Under our current set of policies and standards, yes. So we do report that it's already bad and this is going to make it worse. But under the policies that we're currently operating under, we don't have a way to require improvements on a certain roadway segment. We do look at something that's called a shoulder hour analysis. Really, the primary focus in these studies is the PM peak hour, and we know that the PM peak hour is usually when we have the highest amount of congestion. So we do look at a shoulder hour analysis, which is the hour before or an hour after the peak hour. And if that operates acceptably, we report that. We also offer or include in our policy is like off-site mitigation or alternative mitigation. So in some instances, someone will come in and, you may be exceeding over here, you're constrained by the map, you're built out and constrained, or there's not enough right of way. But maybe there's an opportunity for you to fill in some sidewalk gaps. Maybe you could construct a center turn lane at an intersection, perhaps putting in some pedestrian facilities. We've done a variety of things that way.
Mr. Lancaster. You had another question.
I guess I have a follow-up. It's similar to yours, but so I'm going to use an example here. So you mentioned 10 Mile is built to, the planned cross-section. A Shields store comes along. Do you still require a traffic impact study so you can document the projected changes, or do you say, well, it's going to be what it's going to be and therefore you don't need a study?
For that particular case, the Shields, That is located in an area that's within the city Meridian's 10-mile interchange specific area plan. And when that plan was developed, their consultant HDR did a significant amount of traffic work to determine the collector network and where they wanted controlled intersections. So historically, we defer to the city of Meridian in that area for them to tell us if they think the land use is consistent with the plan. In that instance, they did. We did require a turn lane analysis, and we did have them construct turn lanes at the Shields driveways.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mrs. Wallace.
Well,
Trying to figure out how to ask this, but in follow up to Mr. Lancaster, do any applications ever fail? Because it sounds like there's always a workaround or a punt.
Chairman Ballard, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by fail.
Not approved.
based upon the traffic study.
Based on a traffic study, no, but we do provide that information to the land use agencies, and ultimately, they're the ones that decide if it's an appropriate land use. So we're just responding to an application and reporting the information. Generally, some type of mitigation can be accommodated. It just depends on the circumstance.
All right, so I wasn't putting you on the spot.
That's okay.
You make your recommendation, then it goes up to the agency that approves or, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hood? Then what? Is the, specific for Mr. Hood, a general for you as well, is there ever a drop of water that overflows the cup and that's not going to happen? We're not going to let it happen, or it's a bad thing, or we just end up having to pour it out of the saucer back into the cup at some later point? Horrible, horrible analogy, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't really know how to answer that. I think I'll just, Mindy's last response, I mean, we're reporting, try to get that information to the elected officials and the decision makers, and they get away the pros and cons of allowing the project and dealing with the, increased congestion, delay, whatever the impacts may be of that. And sometimes that does rise to an occasion where, nope, this is a drop too many or whatever, and they say we aren't going to accept it. For the most part, though, I think, and I don't want to say this so to make it sound like it's okay, but my sense is our planning and zoning commission and city council they don't like it, but they're getting more and more comfortable with the additional delay and congestion that are on some of these primary arterials in our community. So I think there's other discussions going on about what can we do to mitigate that? What are we doing with alternative transportation, different modes? I don't know how else to address that concern you have. What's acceptable? Seems like we always kind of move the goal line a little bit, like, what is an acceptable level of service? And then, well, we can deal with a little bit more and shoulder, and then 2 shoulder hours. And, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It's a difficult one. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I think I can speak to this a little bit. And I don't speak for any other members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. But from the P&Z perspective, these impact studies are very useful and very helpful, but they are one piece of the puzzle. For example, there have been in some recent meetings, for example, we've recommended approval or denial on various different applications that had a similar traffic impact, and some of them were because of different issues like transitional space, the long-term plan, how it integrates the community as it is, whether that that traffic impact might be offset at a future point by the transportation infrastructure and things like that. So I think the level of service kind of rating that ACHD gives is very helpful, and it definitely is an important part. But it is one piece of the puzzle. So there are times where, you know, we work and chew on that. And additionally, there is another aspect of how much of it is on the applicant. What are their entitlements? For example, sometimes there are certain entitlements on the property or on the project that the traffic impact study is helpful, but doesn't can't really dictate. I don't want to. I know Kurt's not in the audience, but I don't want to put any words in council in our legal counsel's mouth. But there are some times where that traffic impact study doesn't. We can't make the decision based on that because of other legal entitlements that the developer has on the property and things like that with certain CUPs or development agreements and things like that. So hopefully that helps as well.
Thank you. Ms. Wallace, maybe this one puts you on the spot a little bit, but should we be comfortable with a study being done by an engineer hired by the applicant?
Commissioner Steed, I think that's a fair question. So in 2009, we revamped our traffic impact study policy. And at that time, we did have a very big discussion of should we be selecting a consultant and how would we do that? And how are other agencies doing it? And how are we currently doing it? And that thought at the time was if we allowed an applicant to choose their consultant, maybe there would be less argument or pushback on the conditions because this is you chose consultant, they prepared a study meeting our policy standards, and this is the findings. I will say that that wasn't the immediate effect, and that I'm not convinced that very many applicants are reading these studies before they're provided to us, because we do still have a little bit of that. But overall, the development community generally accepts what's in the studies. And I think an important note is that we're reviewing the traffic study. It doesn't meet our technical standards. That doesn't always mean that we're going to agree with the findings and recommendations of a consultant, and often we don't.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
John Wasson, ACHD. I'd just like to add a little bit to that.
you're welcome to.
Mindy's group is not the only one that reviews those. Some of the other groups, to include my group, reviews those. And I'm just going to say it. You can get anybody to say anything you want if you wave enough money at them. And I've seen that.
I didn't want to go there.
Well, yeah, I'm going there. But we've reviewed some of those plans and found them less than adequate and maybe even a little bit less than that. And we've kicked those back and said, this is not an acceptable traffic review plan. And then they have to go redo that until we're satisfied with it.
Yeah, and I wasn't going so far as to imply that anybody was buying a report, but having personal experience, been in construction for 40 or 50 years, I got to where I was not comfortable with contractors hiring their own testing companies to test soils, asphalt, and concrete. Not that I ever saw anybody do anything that led me to believe that wasn't accurate, but I was just always, since the owner was going to pay for it in the long run anyway, I preferred to go to having the owner hire a separate engineering firm to do the testing of concrete cylinders or whatever have you. Make it the responsibility of the contractor to take and haul those cylinders so he couldn't later holler, somebody jiggled it and therefore I got a bad result. But have an outside owner-paid engineering firm testing company do the testing. Any other questions for Ms. Wallace?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lewis?
I have a question. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. It's about the interjurisdictional relationship on traffic impact studies. I'm thinking of a recent case that was brought before us probably last year about Chinden Boulevard and Black Cat. I'm trying to think, as a development on the north side of Chinden, on Black Cat, where the development wasn't asking for new access to the state highway, so that ACHD was in charge of the traffic impact study. And the traffic impact study said that Chinden would be better if it had a right turn lane at that signal to go from westbound to northbound, but it didn't happen. I'm not remembering all of the details, but I think it was a question of that the highway district couldn't require a turn lane to be built on the state highway or something along those lines. But so my question is, what kind of relationship does the highway district have with the highway department to solve problems like this?
Commissioner Lewis, that's a great question. So that particular case, I think it was related to the modern craftsman apartments there
Could be.
at Black Cat and Tree Farm. And that one was just really unfortunate timing. So the traffic study for that project was reviewed by both ACHD and ITD, and you're correct, the right turn lane was required or recommended in the study. So ACHD generally includes a comment that just says, the traffic study recommends this, and if it's required by ITD, then it should be constructed. In the background of that, we had the STARS agreement for the Costco development or the Lost Rapids subdivision at 10 Mile in Chinden, and they had already designed the plans for the intersection, and it did not include the right turn lane, and because of that, ITD didn't require it to be installed. ITD has one engineer who reviews traffic impact studies for all of District 3, so he's usually generally overwhelmed, but if we ask him to consult with us on something, they're always more than happy to do that. And we recently have had a project that will be, maybe they'll be turning in a development application to Meridian pretty soon, but involves ACHD, ITD, and we've been meeting with the city of Meridian just because the traffic findings are pretty significant, more significant than any of our agencies I think have seen. So we do coordinate and collaborate on the review of the traffic impact studies and what we think may or may not be reasonable in terms of some of the proposed land uses. ITD does have a lot of staffing turnover in the department that does the review of the development applications, and so their responses are varied and they come at all different times. So it's hard to speak specifically to, when they are not providing comments. Caleb, you may have a little bit more insight on when they're able to get back in touch with you.
I'll maybe just reiterate what Mindy said. They have few staff, and the workload is still pretty steady anyways, if not high. Just as an example, we had a project recently that came to council, and there's some level of frustration both from the applicant as well as our council that they were getting comments from ITD the day of the hearing. So they are pretty backed up, and we like to get those comments as soon as we can, and we try to coordinate. But based on turnover and just workload, it is tough. And I'm not trying to make excuses, just telling you, explaining the process, the interagency. Mindy's great. I know Bill and her have, I was going to say daily, but regular conversations. So I think we've got a really good relationship there. ITD sometimes is a little hit and miss. And I don't say that to be derogatory towards ITD staff, just they've got a lot of things going on. And sometimes I'll just kind of take this on a little bit of a tangent. Some of their comments aren't, in our opinion anyways, aren't pertinent to the project at hand, and their scope and what some of the analysis they're looking for is maybe a little broader than what we envision requiring of an applicant. And we still share that information with our council and say, hey, ITD has asked for this as part of their agency comments. Timing though really is key with them. So if I could, just have one thing for them is if you can engage with us earlier, you're going to get a better outcome on the back end rather than waiting till the last minute on some of the stuff. Because time really is money in what we do, and sometimes it tends to be last minute. But we do coordinate with them. We do communicate with them. They're getting better, I'll just say, about attending some of our larger pre-apps. And not even some of their technical staff are at meetings, and we're in fairly regular communications with them too. So not perfect, that interagency, interdepartment, but yeah, it's pretty good anyways.
Any other questions from members? Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
Invite her back in touch.
I'll be happy to do that. Okay, next item on the agenda, we're going to step back to a couple of items that we've talked about before and see if there's any additional information available on them to us. The first one is Corporate Drive and South Progress Avenue. Mr. Watson hadn't held his hand up yet, but he's edging toward his microphone.
John Wasson, Ada County Highway District. I remember looking at it, but I'm gonna have to get back, and I will get back with y'all just as soon as I can. I'll get something to you by the end of this week on that, sir.
Okay, thank you. What I remember of it is that I went out there and sat for a while and looked at it and watched it and understood the question, but personally couldn't come up with a proposal or a solution to what may or may not be a problem. But I know y'all look at it more scientifically than I do.
Well, the big thing is the stop signs have to be visible, and those stop signs are visible at that. And the driver's manual specifically says where you can't see traffic, you can edge forward. And occasionally, because of a number of different reasons, the stop sign is not in the middle of the intersection telling people to stop at the intersection. It's further back. Sometimes we'll push the stop bars up a little bit, other times we don't. And that depends on whether there's a crosswalk at that location. So if there's a crossing area at that location, we're going to have the stop bar just behind where that crosswalk is. But the answer is you stop, you can pull forward, and you can gain the necessary sight distance so that you can complete your maneuver.
Thank you. Yeah. Maybe not this next week, but before our next meeting, we'll move it forward to the next meeting and see if you have any words of wisdom to add at that time. Next one is Tree Farm Way and Chinden Boulevard. This was a product of a letter from a resident on the north side of Chinden, and it primarily talked about traffic in and out of Rock Harbor Church, which is right down the street from the intersection you were talking about a moment ago.
Right, yeah.
And Mr. Watson, you had a comment or two about it the last time we were here. I didn't know if you had any new information for us or not, or maybe Mr. Hood does.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't necessarily have any, well, maybe it is new information for you. A couple of different, and I think in your packet, there's at least one of the correspondences. One of them has gone to the mayor's office as well, so there is some concern. Most recently, the complainant, so the first one that I was aware of that I think is in your packet was concerned about the stacking up near Tree Haven Way and Tree Farm Way, kind of out of the church, and it queuing all the way back, hundreds of feet back that way. Most recently, though, we've gotten complaints and concern for stacking onto 2026. So turning right onto Tree Farm northbound from 2026, and it actually backing up into the highway. So I believe Mr. Price was gonna take that and do some analysis with that information, or at least see if they've gotten any complaints at ITD about that, or are aware of that. That was the first time I'd heard that, particularly on Sunday mornings, it was backing out into the highway.
Yeah, a couple of comments that I've made about this area. One, Rock Harbor Church, and I don't go there, just see it when I drive down the road, but it is not a Sunday morning only place. They have a large number of cars there all through the week, I presume with various classes and groups meeting and all of that. I went by it this past Sunday, just happened to be while it was before they had let out, and a sea of cars, a lot of cars, and it's going to take a while to get them out of there. Mr. Price, do you have anything on this for us?
So I know last time, oh, I guess a couple months ago when we discussed this, the question came up about an additional access to Chinden. I know that has been requested at least once, if not more, to be reviewed, and that's a non-starter from ITD's perspective. I have not heard of any complaints that we've received for vehicles stacking up on Chinden. I will follow up with our public information coordinator to see if that's still the case. But yeah, so I'll look at that one. I haven't received complaints. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That obviously would be a big safety concern for us if they're stacking up onto a highway that's 55 miles an hour. That's not going to be a good thing for anybody. So I will look at that, and I will follow up again with our public information personnel just to see if there were additional complaints. But that's all I have on that matter.
Okay, and you're saying that a right out only added to the Rock Harbor Church parking lot is a non-starter?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I remember, I want to say it was 4 years ago, maybe. It was shortly after the church had opened. It might have been open for a year, and it was requested, reviewed, and I know that that correspondence did that. It wasn't part of the corridor plan. There wasn't going to be an additional access.
Okay.
So.
And I seem to remember that a year or so ago, maybe you and I talked, there was some either discussion or thought of looking at the tree farm signal in terms of its timing setting for Sunday mornings. Do you remember anything about that, or did I make that up?
Yeah, no, we've looked at the timing. So I did. So ACHD, they manage the signals for us in Ada County. So I did reach out to them, and we reviewed signal timings for Sundays, and then also for other times. I think it was at this meeting, actually, we discussed it as well. Because if we knew times when Rock Harbor had events, then ACHD's always been easy to work with to make some timing changes to help with certain events. But if they're, Tuesday at 3:00 one week and the next week it's Wednesday at 4, we can't change timings like that. But
Right.
if it's a consistent meeting or a consistent time coming in or letting out, then we can review those and make some adjustments to timing if they seem appropriate.
Mr. Speed,
Mr. Ballard.
let me ask a question. I'm looking at this map. See if I have this right. I'm going west on 26. I want to make a right onto Tree Farm Way. And then I come up a small distance and I make a left to get onto Tree Haven, which then I'm assuming the large gray area is the church property. Correct?
Church parking lot, yes.
All right. And so when I'm making that left to get onto Tree Haven, apparently there's enough cars onto Tree Haven trying to get into the parking lot that forces in Tree Farm Way to back up onto 26. Is that the problem?
Mr. Hood, is that how you heard the latest comment?
As I understand it, yes, that is the maneuver. Would be you're westbound on 26, trying to go northbound on Tree Farm. And that's so backed up already at that point before you turn left on Tree Haven that it's queuing back onto the highway. Yes.
All right, so my question is, if I can't make that left because it's backed up, are the cars then continuing on Tree Farm to make a button hook to come back?
Yeah.
They could.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ballard, I don't know what, if motorists are just there waiting and waiting and waiting to make the left and that's what's causing the backup, or if they're going up and around. Even leaving the church, I mean, we've talked to them before about sending people back out to Black Cat because that's a signalized intersection as well. So yes, it's a little bit out of direction for probably most people, but it's not that far out of the way and it could relieve some of the congestion that's at this intersection.
Well, what I'm looking at, and I apologize, I'm wearing my attorney's hat. My question is, if I'm holding an event which forces traffic back on 26, when there might be a relief valve by either having signal people or flaggers, if you will, try to move the traffic along a little bit.
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ballard, we've talked about that too, if it's necessary. I think we're just at the stage where we've gotten, to my knowledge, one complaint / concern about that. And so I don't know if this is a reality of every Sunday, if this is they had a weird event and it backed up for one time, one platoon of cars got backed up, or if this is a regular occurrence. I think that is one of the, measures that may be necessary is talk to the church, say, hey, you got to hire some traffic control folks and have them flag on, if with signal timing and some of these other things we've talked about doesn't work, then, maybe that is one of the next steps. We've at least discussed that. But again, I don't want to jump to solving a problem if it really isn't. It sounds like Mr. Price isn't really aware of this either. So maybe it was just a weird one-off thing and it's never going to happen again. And, so again, I would caution just a little bit about looking for solutions until we understand what the problem really is and what people are doing or what motorists are doing that may be odd or.
No, you've answered the question because what I raised is already part of the conversation or in that process, because there is a solution to that.
Commissioner Ballard, Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD. The neighborhood or the church has been using flaggers, and I've seen them using flaggers on Chinden Boulevard. Problem is they don't have permission.
Well, that was my next question.
And there's a process that they have to go through with both ACHD and with the state of Idaho. They have to provide a temporary traffic control plan and explain how they're going to do this. The problem is, in 1 minute, there are 60 seconds. And Chinden gets most of those 60 seconds because they're the big boy. And I'm going to make it simple. They have 100 cars an hour on the street. And Tree Farm has 6. And we give Tree Farm X number of seconds. And unfortunately, sometimes they're well utilized and sometimes they're not well utilized. And if you have somebody sitting there not paying attention to the signal, and it takes them 4.5 or 5 seconds to start moving, you only get 3 or 4 or 5 cars through there and the signal goes red. And hopefully the people behind them don't continue to enter onto Chinden on a red light. And so I understand where ITD would have some consternation with consistent flagging on their road network every Sunday, 3, 4, 5 times a day when this church gets out, as opposed to the church actually wanting to come to a meeting and try to solve the problem and say, how can we better distribute our patrons onto the road network system to better utilize the system without impacting Tree Farm exclusively?
I wasn't suggesting flaggers on Shinden. I was suggesting flaggers up inside the subdivision to steer it. And to put it in my terms, what side of the V in the lawsuit am I going to be on? The left or the right side?
No, and I
If
understand
someone
that,
gets
but
injured, and it's preventable.
I do understand that, but I have seen them flagging on Chinden Boulevard, and I asked where their permit was, and they said, we don't need no stinking permit.
Well, okay, all right. My question's been answered, but it is part of the process, and you sit down, you have a conversation, and you figure out how to solve it.
A question from myself, can anyone tell me, and I ought to know because I drive it, is there a dedicated right turn lane westbound on 26 at Tree Farm Way? Appears to be. Okay, that answers one question. Thank you. Anyone else with a question on this topic? I'm going to suggest that we punt this one like we did the previous item and ask Mr. Price and Mr. Wasson that if they can develop any new or just, well, I won't say helpful, just plain new information about this situation to see if they have the time and ability to get it back to us before our next monthly meeting. Is that okay with folks?
Well, Mr. Steed, I would say, yes, that's okay, but maybe there's someone else that needs to be invited to that conversation. And I say this carefully, would the commission want to hear from the Rock Island Church to say, let's hear their part of the story? I'm not trying to take over Mr. Washington's job or anybody else's, but I kind of got the comment that maybe somebody doesn't want to come to the table.
Well, I'm not going to answer the last part. I guess I will ask Mr. Hood, the former, do we have the ability to request a private property owner with a traffic situation come talk to us?
Sure, I can request it, and I don't know that I'd read too much into that if they can't make it or won't make it. I think they still have opportunities, and I would encourage them to at least talk with ACHD and ITD about solving some of these traffic concerns. But I can invite them to an upcoming meeting, and we can, I might coordinate that a little bit with Justin and John and let them do some of their analysis, and so we can bring all that at the same time, and especially if there's some recommendations, it would make sense to have the church, they know there's a problem, so.
Well,
yeah.
I'm not suggesting we are the forum,
Yeah,
but I've been here, 24, 10 years now. And we get situations where there's a problem that has developed.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, is there an opportunity to be on the front end of a problem and say, and we have solved one or two of the front end problems.
for sure.
That's all I'm not trying to interfere at all, and
I'm not going to speak for the church. I don't attend there either. I think they'd be willing to be part of a conversation. And so again, I just think, let's let the transportation agencies kind of figure out what get their head around kind of what's happening and maybe what needs to change. And then we can bring the church in, what they're seeing and what change is appropriate.
I'd rather hear from the church after they have
Yeah.
had an opportunity to sit down with the two transportation agencies and come and let us know what they've either worked out or discovered cannot be worked out, as the case may be. I don't know that we want to be in the position of calling a church on the carpet, because I don't think we've got that authority, but you know, we listen to citizens' comments and questions and complaints and try to give them a way to vent and to give us a chance to ask the knowledgeable agencies about, is it a real problem? Is it something can be done about it? What do we know? What can we do? So Ms. Hill and Mr. Hood, if y'all would help some of that happen, we'd appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there's only been like one complaint. Are we making this, we gonna make a big deal out of this and have everybody looking at it and?
There's been more than one. The one that we had 2 months ago was from a lady complaining about traffic coming out of the church parking lots onto Tree Farm Way and backing up to the north, impacting what it seemed to me to be her ability to come and go from her residence. There's also been another one that I don't remember having seen, but went to the mayor's office talking about the intersection at 26. They may be two different problems, but they both have to do with the volume of traffic in and out of the church parking lot.
Mr. Chair.
I'm with you. I'm reluctant to take this thing up to a level of, oh my God, if we don't know for sure if it's there yet. I heard someone.
Mr. Chair, Sergeant Smith, Meridian Police.
Sergeant, good to hear from you. Can you help us here?
Yeah, I'm just going to let you know we've received at least 2, maybe more complaints from different citizens as well. They kind of hit different agencies. So yeah, we have received a few too, and Corporal Weitzel's looked into it quite a bit, talked to the church a little bit. Our only suggestion from our side was to help them come up with a traffic flow where they have an in only and an out only, and potentially use Black Cat so they can get their traffic flowing and people aren't trying to turn left in or out of there. But that's as far as we've gotten, because we knew the commission was going to take this up with them. So,
Sergeant, if we could add the PD to the 2 agencies, along with Mr. Hood's conversation about trying to find a way to involve the church, who they may, for all I know, they may jump at the chance. Maybe they just haven't, been asked. So
I know from my understanding, they're looking for a solution. I don't think they know what it is either. So yeah, I would imagine they're willing to speak with us and see if we can come up with something that works for everybody.
I think everybody might be a bridge too far, but I'd be hopeful. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, the next item is a Valley Regional Transit ridership update from Ms. Taysom.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulties today, but I did send over a memo to be included in the packet, and you can see that overall our ridership is up, especially regarding the routes serving Meridian. We do have several new types of service in Meridian. A brand new route is serving you now that started in June of 2024. That is the Route 24, which connects the village to the Town Square Mall. Between June and August, we had a total of 4,000 riders on that route. Ridership is up as well on the 30. Last year for the same time period, we had 1,273 riders. This last year was 1,394, so a 10% increase. You'll see an 11% increase in the 40, a 40% increase in the 42, and 128% increase in the 45. The biggest changes outside of the new service have been to the 42 and the 45. The 42 has gone from a semi all-day route with less than hourly service to hourly all day, connecting Caldwell to the Town Square Mall. And the 45 now mirrors the 30 through Meridian and connects CWI to Town Square Mall and Boise State University. And between the 30 and the 45, there's now 30-minute peak service in the city of Meridian, which is, almost double what it was before. You can see that there were some maps as well showing that ridership has kind of shifted in the city. I did rerun the report again this morning just to do some clarification, and looking at just the stops in Meridian. We're seeing a 9%, 9.5% increase in boardings for the months of June, July, and August, and a 5.2% increase in alightings for that same time period.
Thank you, ma'am. If I'm reading your two maps that were in our packet correctly, I have a question.
Yes.
The June, and I'll say right off the bat that I think that a September report on a major change like VRT went through just in June is probably a little early to be able to really tell a lot.
Right.
But, so therefore, based upon that, I can tell you you'll be invited back to tell us more when you know more. But on the two maps in the packet on pages 17 and 18,
yes,
the 2023 June through August average daily, comparing the Route 42
this
to itself, it looks to me like we have generally lower ridership with the new routing than we did prior, where on the ones up above the interstate, they are mostly up. Is there a identifiable reason for that, if I'm reading it correctly?
I think what we're actually seeing here is a shift in where people are getting on the bus. So yeah, I do see that. The biggest change that you're going to see is between the stops at Overland, and I think it is just off of Eagle Road at Silverwood. I think what we're seeing is people are shifting to a different mode, or taking the bus maybe from Overland further in to connect to other routes. Sorry, I've got background noise distracting me. So yeah, it does look like if you just look at the 42, like route ridership overall is down on the stops, but and I did send this out to you late this afternoon, Mr. Chair, but we are seeing some increase overall on the 42. We're looking at about 20 and 26 boardings and alightings for this last year, whereas for this year, whereas last year we were at 15 and 18 boardings and alightings.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like people are just shifting to different locations on the route. So.
Yeah, and I understand that with these kind of things, sometimes cause and effect are hard to identify.
Yes, yes, they are. I'm really looking forward to continuing to monitor this. Really over the next year, we anticipate usually a route will settle in to kind of a groove within a year and really max out its ridership within 3 years. So it's going to be really intriguing to watch and see how the increase in service on the 42 really enhances its ridership over the next few years.
Also, I understand that y'all have been tweaking some bus stop times as you see that either something left you too much time between here and there, or not enough time, and so you're tweaking those. And as those settle down, I would expect that would settle down your ridership numbers to something that's more relatable to what it used to be.
Yes, indeed. And we're continuing to monitor the performance of our routes as far as the on-time performance, just to see where improvements need to be made, see if we've didn't give the route enough time, if we gave it too much time, et cetera. And we'll continue to modify just to kind of refine it as needed. We did a change in September to adjust some of those on-time performance issues and are watching it closely to see how things improve.
Okay, questions from Ms. Tyson? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank
The
you.
next item on our agenda are ex officio updates, and since, Ms. Tyson, you have your microphone turned on, why don't we let you go first if there's anything additional?
Nothing significant. We are starting the launch of our Valley Connect 3.0 update. I believe you've already seen some information come out about that, but we're very excited for the next update to our long range service plan, designing overall enhancements for the valley as a whole. I think that's the major thing that we've got going on right now, and just plugging on to the next fiscal year and looking forward to scheduling the next service adjustments.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Price, anything from ITD?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief update on Eagle Road. So we did, as you guys know, we did have the open houses for the two public open houses. There were quite a few people who attended, and then we got a number of additional comments. The online comment period lasted a couple weeks past those open houses. So all the comments have been reviewed, and as of this morning, a summary is being completed, which then will go through the executive team at ITD and then presented to everybody else on what the plan is moving forward from that. So, but reasonably well attended at the two open houses. So some good comments.
Anything else?
That's all I have for today. Heather did mention that we will have project updates. They'll be for the next meeting. We'll have a new update on all the projects. So,
Okay, thank you very much. Sergeant Smith, anything else on your mind?
No, sir, I don't think I have any other updates for you guys this month.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Carson, what's going on in the school bus business?
Yeah, so we've been doing some work on a couple of our campuses to try to get the traffic flow on campus to be better, and hopefully that will trickle out with some positive effects on the streets in front of schools. We, as far as busing goes, our badge system is up and running, and we've been really impressed by that and how the students and the drivers have handled that rollout. We also have ridership up, so we're really excited about that. We are counting ridership a bit differently than we counted it last year, so it's not apples to apples, and there may be some chance that it's not exact from last year to this year, but either way, it still shows that ridership is up. And we think that's probably attributed to our contractor and our driver count being a little higher this year and being able to have a little bit more on-time performance.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Hood, several months ago or 6 months ago, we had a complaint, comment, or whatever about the charter school on Cherry Lane that originally was Compass, or at one point was Compass, And for the moment, I can't, is it Doral? I drove by there coming here today and noticed they were double stacking cars in their own parking lot, wrapping around the back of the building. And I don't think we've heard any more complaints about backing up onto Cherry Lane. So I think that's the kind of thing that's helping us, or helping them, as the case may be.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I haven't received any more correspondence regarding that school, so.
Ms. Klopfenstein, anything from Compass?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. A few things. So our public comment period for the Let's Ride Treasure Valley Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, which is a study looking at future high-capacity transit options running east-west, connecting Caldwell to Boise. The first public comment period is open until this Thursday, the 10th. So if you do have comments, please check out our website. I'll actually forward our latest promotional email for that public comment period to Heather, and she can pass it on to you all. So would love to get your comments. One thing that Compass has completed is launching the Good Move campaign, which is a regional safety action campaign, really intended to get everyone, all the agencies in the region, our member agencies, speaking the same language on safety and encouraging safe behavior on our streets. And then last but not least, the Compass Phase 1 applications are open, so this is somewhat relevant to the Transportation Commission. We at Compass manage the federal formula funds, and so if you do have a transportation project, we do ask that's intended to use federal transportation funds, we do ask that you submit an application to us. And even if it's not intended to be funded with federal transportation funding, we do have a resource development team that does a great job of making sure that these projects are funded in a variety of ways, whether it be discretionary grants or private grants or other things. So just wanted to note that deadline is November 20th. And that's all from me.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Watson, best for last, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finished up the analysis on Everest east of Saguaro Hills for traffic calming. It did not meet any of the criteria. Finished up Saguaro south of Chinden, and it failed to meet the speed or the volume criteria. And Crest Ridge in South Meridian also failed to meet the speed or the volume criteria for traffic calming. They thought that things had gotten a whole lot worse, and it hadn't. Volumes had gone up about 100, so about a third, and their peak hour dropped by 30%. So right now, Meridian is 3 for 3.
A question on that, if I may interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
You did the study, you found the answer, you advised the person or persons that had asked for it. How long in time would it need to go before you would do the study again? I know you wouldn't turn around next week, but is that in your policy? How long you'll have to put them apart?
Currently, our policy states 18 months.
Okay.
We are reviewing policy, and one of the changes that we have recommended as staff members is 3 years. Just because we're doing anywhere between 150 and 200 speed studies, and one person doesn't like the answer, and then somebody else calls up and says it's horrible, and we can't do the same street 2 or 3 times a year. And ultimately, what I have found is some of these streets do meet the criteria because they're gaming the system.
For those that didn't see my face, oh, really?
All you have to do is drive over the hoses X number of times and you get the volume criteria.
Oh,
Or you drive like banshees and you're going to get the speed criteria.
now you're telling secrets.
It's not a secret. I mean, we've caught people doing it. But the real answer is you can do that. You can, as a single individual, you may be able to influence the data that comes back. You have to sell your case to all your neighbors on the street that things are horrible. And I've had people call up and say, sir, we've got hoses out on these streets and there's some woman driving like an idiot up and down the road, back and forth over these hoses. Do you know why? And a lot of times people have issues on streets, and yes, they need traffic calming. And when we do the studies, we can validate that they realistically need traffic calming, and the traffic calming makes a change. And I'll give you the best example I can think of, Temple Drive, back behind the Fred Meyer off of Chinden. We just put in 9 speed cushions between Bergman and Meridian Road, and we saw the speeds drop 7 to 9 miles an hour for the 85th and the 95th percentile speeds. With the no left out of Bergman and people from Fred Meyer cutting through that neighborhood to get to the signal, people, I think, are now recognizing that it's better to make a right out of Fred Meyer, go down to Linder where there are U-turns authorized, because we're also seeing the volumes dropping on those streets. But the neighbors have to sign these petitions. And so if it's one person being a bad actor because they think it's important, we're going to look at the petition paperwork. And if all the signatures are the same, and I've seen 1 or 2 like that in 20 plus years, or we get complaints that people are speaking inaccurately on what's going to happen. Sometimes we go back and look at those.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you. Any questions for any of the ex officios, gentlemen? Staff communications, Ms. Hill, you're up.
Thank you. So there's quite a few staff communications. I'm going to start with a few that aren't in the packet. So just for those who aren't aware, ACHD Commission adopted their integrated 5-year work plan during a public hearing on September 25th. I'm working on finalizing that list against our priorities, and we'll make that available to you. From when I came in July and shared that draft with you, a couple of projects were put back into programming, so they weren't deferred. So I'll compile that and share that with you prior to the next meeting or just via email so you can see that. But wanted to bring you up to speed on that. Also, during that public hearing on the 25th, the commission adopted the concept study for the Linder Road project that's been before us, and they took into consideration our recommendation for concept number 2 as well. So circling back on that, that's about all I know at this point for that, since it's not programmed for anytime soon. And then last update before we get into some of the emails, next Tuesday on the 15th, our new youth commissioner will be appointed by resolution, Lily Miller. So I'll be reaching out to them to set up some orientation and get them up to speed in anticipation that they'll be here for the November Transportation Commission. So wanted to let you all know since Hayun is at Stanford. So moving on to the correspondences, these start on page 75 of the packet. It's a big packet this month with the VRT ridership update and just survey information. So Mr. Chair, I don't know how you want to go through these emails. They're broken out by correspondences just because there's so many pages. I think there's about 8 different email threads. So I don't know if it's in the best interest to really go through each of these in this setting. I'm happy to talk about any that we feel we have questions for now, or we can also pick some of these up at the next meeting as well if we need time to digest all of these. So
Let's do it that way. We don't, we've all got the packet. We've all had the opportunity to read the letters. Why don't we take them one at a time though, and see if commissioners either have questions, comments, or even a request to bring it back with more information next month. So let's start with number 1, which is on page 75. Anyone, anything from that one?
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would like to hear about this one. I have no idea what this person's talking about.
You see what I see.
So, as I understand it, Eagle Road and Amity Road is a roundabout with curbs, as I recall. So I'm not sure what vehicles are running off of the pavement. And then I don't know what, let's see, what crossing signals are. And I don't know why the Illinois Department of Transportation is installing anything there. So I guess I'm confused.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard, and I'm not ignoring you, but we'll,
Yeah, please, any enlightenment.
can you help him, Mr. Ballard?
no, the only thing that I saw in his request, his last paragraph, first sentence, please seriously consider notifying the Southwest Ada County Alliance Neighborhood Association. I didn't look this up, but within the city ordinances, state statutes, can an association file a request for notice? Because I'm familiar in some settings, like a water hood or a water association can request notices. So if it's just a matter of getting him on a list, if that is appropriate to include him on a list, that would answer that question, I believe.
Mr. Hood, what is the current required notification for developments? It's property owners within some number of feet?
500 feet of the external boundaries of a subject property for development applications to receive the postcard. So that's one of the forms of notice we do for new development. Anyone, though, can go on to the city's website and register to receive those transmittals. And I believe that is what we replied back to this person. Hey, we won't, pick and choose and filter and send you ones that you care about. You've got to determine that, but you can sign up to get all the transmittals, kind of like our development review team gets, and you can filter through them. If it's in Northwest Meridian, delete, you don't have to read it, but you can sign up through the city clerk's office to get noticed when any project comes into the city. So that was the response back to this gentleman was, yes, we add you to a list, but you add yourself by you register to be part of that list. So
has he been told that, or will he be told that?
that's what we're trying to, I know we've had conversation. There was a couple of people on his email. I wasn't sure if he was representing the Southwest Ada County Alliance or some others that were on there. I think he did respond to me. I'll have to look through my emails to see what the most recent correspondences were. But if he hasn't been, and Southwest State County Alliance haven't been told that, they can all sign up too on there with whatever email address they want to the city clerks on the city's website via the city clerk.
As a reader of those development applications, I can assure him there are a lot of them he won't care about. But they're 3 and 4 days sometimes. Okay, anyone else on number 1? Correspondence number 2, commissioners? I'm sorry, were you finished, Mr. Lancaster, on the first one?
Finished enough.
Okay, how about number 2?
I have nothing on number 2, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Chairman, just a question. Is correspondence 2 about the crash you told us about that you almost witnessed?
Living color.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
I tried to look for pictures on my phone at our meeting at the PD and couldn't find them in time to show you, but this gentleman was nice enough to send them in. There you go. I've told y'all before, my wife and I walked this sidewalk an hour before this happened.
Yeah.
And she and I are still looking at each other, wondering whether we would run left, run right, or run into each other and been run over. There's no way to know. And the PD told us at our meeting that the speed on this car was somewhere in the 65-mile-an-hour range, give or take. So it was cooking. Sergeant Smith, did y'all ever ascertain, or can you say the reason for the speed?
We had that question and we never got a clear answer as to why this person was driving in that manner. They did not live in that subdivision. I have no idea what they were thinking.
They do or don't live in the subdivision?
To my knowledge, they do not live in the subdivision. They were visiting someone there they knew.
Okay.
Next question, Mr. Steed, for
Yes, sir.
Sergeant. If a court date has been set? No, you
I don't-
get a charge of reckless driving, and I was just kind of curious. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Commissioner Ballard, I don't have that information offhand. There is a public repository for the court where you can look up cases, but
yes.
I wouldn't be able
Earlier
to.
today. Yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to necessarily give you this person's name, but I don't have that information right offhand.
Very good. Steve, this just seems to be a one-off situation.
I would tend to agree.
So in response to this citizen, I think what we've seen here is probably appropriate, that from what I know, which is little, that it's a one-off situation and probably doesn't happen again.
I walk that street, I drive that street, I live in the neighborhood. I'm not going to say no one speeds on these streets, but they certainly don't do 65 on any kind of regular basis. And seems that everybody pretty well minds the speed limit. Mr. Watson, I believe you answered this in here. I'm having trouble finding my spot, but in terms of your policy and criteria for requests for surveys and whatever, and he also mentioned in his letter gondola, which is the half-mile stretch from Rustic Oak east to Black Cat that we've talked about before.
Yes, sir. John Wasson, ACHD. We're still not satisfied with doing a speed study for record on gondola because there is still a large amount of development in the area. And gondola is a collector road. And so those homeowners that would live in there have an opportunity to say yes or no. When you have a subdivision that's in the process of being built, those votes go to the developer because he is the property owner. And one developer can squash the entire process. And so we don't do that. We also find that once people live in a neighborhood, the speeds do tend to go down a little bit to more than a little bit as mamas slap husbands upside the head and say, "You're in our neighborhood. What are you doing speeding 35 miles an hour on a 25-mile-an-hour street?" So we do see some of that.
One other little piece of information on this, I don't know how many of y'all are at all familiar with it, but rustic oak from Macmillan, the Macmillan Rustic Oak Roundabout will soon be a through street to Chinden. And it's going to be at Chinden, a right-in, right-out only, I was told today by ITD. It's currently blocked because the developer has not made the connection, but I believe the developer would like to get it made. ITD is working on it in terms of what can and can't be done. So Rustic Oak will become a through street, much like Gondola, but they're still building on the north end of it, the north half mile or mile. So a lot of new houses out there. Okay. Anyone else, any question on that one? Item number, I think we're up to 3.
That's correct. On page 79.
I'm sorry,
On page 79.
I couldn't understand you.
Correspondence 3 is on page 79 of the
Okay.
packet.
Thank you. Any questions from any commissioners or anyone else?
Number 3.
That was 3.
Yeah, and I think the response is appropriate that if annually we have reviewed the projects, right? Streets, sidewalks, pathways. And seems to me the information is out there that these situations are reviewed. And as the matters present themselves, they get on a schedule at some time to fill those gaps. So I think the response was appropriate. And I'm not weighing that. I'm just saying that's the information that things get built as time progresses. Number 4.
Number 4. Questions, comments? Mr. Watson, I saw yesterday or day before, for the first time, a quote-unquote temporary signal at McDermott and Eustick.
Yes, sir.
I was shocked. Not against it, just I've never seen one before. Solar powered, on girders or whatever you want to call them, small girders.
Get out more often.
I do. Where have you seen one?
On highways, I wasn't surprised at all.
The ones I've seen on highways where you've got a bridge being built on and they're stopping the traffic to make it one way, those to me have always been on wooden power poles and or bigger things than this. This one's an interesting one.
Mr. Chair, in my time there, I can think of about 3 locations where we've installed temporary signals while we're in the process of determining ultimate right-of-way and getting things set up to put them in. And this is just one of those few locations.
And according to the note in the packet from Ms. Hill, y'all are looking at Black Cat and Macmillan too.
That is correct, sir.
That will really help me get down to Walmart for another thing of bread and some milk.
We'll make sure we put a roundabout in then, sir.
Someday, please. Okay. You have to time when you go through there, because you time it wrong, you're not going to go through. Okay, number 5. Anyone? Sounds like Mr. Hood, or Mr. Watson, one of the other, this seems to be a real problem that has been agreed with the complainant, and people are working on it or looking at working on it.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
me, Hopkins, Commissioner Hopkins, hello, I'm down here.
yeah, sorry.
Hey, Caleb. When was the construction done on that? Wasn't that July?
No, I think it was later than that.
I think it started in August. Am I
Maybe.
feeling?
Just, that's about the ugliest project like that I think I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of those go down.
Yeah, we have got some complaints. I know the director and his staff have driven it a few times. I don't think it's in your packet. Some motorcyclists were concerned
Mhm,
about
it is.
some of the grooving and whatnot. So I know ACHD's gone out there, had a response. They're gonna follow up. They're gonna let it cure a little bit longer, see if there's anything else. I know some paving over manholes occurred too, so maybe didn't go as well as we were hoping for either, that treatment. You know, there's pros and cons. I do appreciate some of the coordination with ACHD just on the timing, trying to hit that right. So there weren't festivals and parades and things, and trying to get it in this summer and work with the city and the chamber to just work on nighttime work and even painting and stuff like that. So, but no, we've gotten quite a few complaints actually about the quality of the job done. Not a city project as it says in the packet, but we've asked ACHD, they're aware, they're monitoring it, whatever they're gonna do. I'm not gonna put John on the spot. But there've been other folks at ACHD that we've shared some of the displeasure with the quality of the job done. Yeah, I'll probably just leave it there.
I'm familiar with the contractor that put that down, so. And I've seen them they all fail. That's the other thing. Seems like a year or two in, they're chunking out.
Anything else? Item number 6. For those of you like myself that had a little trouble figuring out what we're talking about here, it's the southeast corner of McDermott and Macmillan. That southeast corner is a neighborhood that's been built out for about 2.5 years, 3 years. And there's a 10-foot wide sidewalk that goes east and west and north and south there. But it's never been connected down to the asphalt streets. It recently became obvious as a problem when I asked about it, when they opened up the intersection of Black Cat and McDermott, which was closed down for repaving north and south on McDermott and under the underpass at Macmillan. And I watched a lady on a bike with 2, not small, but small enough children on bikes, have to navigate through the dirt and the rocks and the holes to get across to the north side of Macmillan where you see the concrete. There is a charter school that's a half mile north of this intersection. I don't know the lady that went to ACHD about it. I never heard of her before I saw this. But it's a problem that needs a solution. My question went to a little bit of everybody. I sent it to ACHD, to the city, to ITD, not knowing myself who, if anybody, might want to take responsibility and get something done. Mr. Watson told me before the meeting today that they're working on it. No plan yet, but looking for a plan. Anything else, Mr. Watson?
Mr. Chair, if I could just chime in, since I've spoken with Miss Lee, who went to the ACHD Commission, and she was there again, I think it was last week. The rapid implementation or project implementation team is looking at it. So there are a couple folks at ACHD are in the very early stages of discussions and seeing what improvements can be made, but there hasn't been any decisions yet. And so I have included that email correspondence with Christy Inselman as well. So it sounds like there's several people seeing if there's something in some sort of expedited matter of fashion, but I don't have any other updates than that. But I thought I would just add that for John Watson's kind of context too.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD.
Yes, sir.
The traffic team has been reorganized a little bit, and we are now in the traffic and safety group, and that's headed up by Matt Deegan. And so this has fallen into his lap. We're trying to figure out what we need to do, because a year ago, this problem didn't exist because we didn't have any sidewalk on the opposite side.
Correct.
We do now. We do have a standard detail that shows how we can set up a crossing at this location where we're 100, 150, 250 feet away from the intersection. There is a standard detail that we've got that will allow that to happen. We just have to figure out how we're going to put a project together so that we can bring this up to ADA standards, because with any new project, this has to be ADA compliant.
Okay, anyone, any questions, comments? I'm tickled that people are looking at it, working on it. Number 7.
This is the same as number 5, Mr. Chairman.
I think, yeah, it is.
Number 8.
Mr. Ballard wants to move on to number 8.
Suggested. I'm driving this bus.
I'll get my papers flipped around. I didn't print the entire packet for myself this time like I normally do, because it was 91 pages of something. I'm going to start this one off because Friday afternoon I went out there and sat for 30 minutes. And I went from reading this thinking the man's really overblowing things to thinking, well, he's got a few points in there that I can actually watch happen. People do roll the red light and right-hand turn when they're coming south and turning to the west. Not all of them, but a number. I would not want to be a regular pedestrian doing that, even if I did have the light in my favor to walk. I'm not sure what he means or what other people mean about running red lights. And Sergeant Smith, if you're still with us, I'm going to ask you that. What is considered running a red light? No. If I'm half a block away and it turns red and I blow straight through it, hoping somebody's got a camera and I can make it on TV having died, that's running a red light. At what point does a car run a red light?
So, Mr. Chair, our burden of proof on those is if they pass the stop line after the light turns red. So if they enter the intersection on a yellow, but complete their turn on red, they did not run the red light. I think a lot of the public don't understand. They're seeing like tailgating vehicles coming through on a yellow and completing those turns on red, and they're considering that running the red light. We do have some red light runners. Obviously, in a town this size, I've seen some myself just driving off duty that are blatant red light runners. But typically, that's what we're seeing is they're entering on a yellow.
Is the same true of people going straight, such as those I watched going south through this intersection? Virtually every light, once it turned yellow, I even had an assistant with me. I asked my wife to watch for the cars, and I would call yellow and then call red, because it was hard to look for both. They're moving pretty good. But we would have three, maybe four go through and complete the intersection on yellow, and then maybe one or two still in the intersection when it actually turned red.
Yeah, so this situation is difficult to enforce for lots of reasons, but that's one of them. So imagine being by yourself in a car 3 lanes away, and I've got to look to see when are you passing the line and look the opposite direction to see when the light exactly turned red. So that's difficult in itself. The other thing is getting to them. So oftentimes we see a violation, but I'm charged with the public safety, and so I cannot create a bigger hazard trying to get to it. So me navigating an intersection sometimes, if it's right in front of me and I'm first in line, I can get to some of those. I'm often going somewhere else that's a higher priority. There's lots of reasons why sometimes we didn't see it to be able to judge that they ran it. And, that timing that we just talked about. We tend to work mobilizations on intersections for red lights using spotters on the ground with a radio who's radioing ahead to staged units down the street that can just stop these more safely. But that takes time and manpower that we often just don't have.
Does anyone know what criteria the city of Boise is going to use with their new red light cameras?
Oh boy, that's a big can of worms you just opened up, Mr. Chairman.
The newspaper.
Huge can of worms.
News says they're going to do it. Okay.
Let's go back, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant David Ballard. So if I heard you right, I'm not challenging you on this. I heard you to say that if you're at the stop line at the intersection and the light is yellow, I can proceed even though the light turns red going through the intersection.
Mr. Ballard, that is correct. They have to have crossed the stop line while the light is red to make that a violation.
All right. So 55 years ago, when I got that license, when it turns yellow, I always learned that's a pretty good signal to stop because it is going to turn red. So my concern now is Billy Bob behind me saying, geez, you stopped on a yellow and I rear-ended you. You're kind of at fault because you had every right to go through that yellow light, even if it turned red on you.
No, that's not going to be a situation where we would cite somebody for not entering the intersection on a yellow. That's going to be the person's fault for not stopping and rear-ending traffic in front of him that did stop.
Yeah, well, I know it goes on, but okay, all right. I better go back and read my traffic manual. I haven't had to take that test in over 40 years.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
John Wasson, ACHD. I think this is going to be a exercise moving forward between the city of Boise and Ada County Highway District with the red light running cameras. I know that part of it is going to be, an officer is going to be reviewing these to make sure that it is a run versus a not run. I don't know how the citations are going to work, but it's a pilot program. So going forward, there's going to be lots of lessons learned and lots of opportunities possibly to make changes before this goes full bore, if it does go full bore with the city of Boise, and then possibly other jurisdictions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ballard.
I read a citation. The driver said, "Oh, no, I didn't read that red light." I pulled up the photograph that comes along with the citation. Shutter clicks if you're crossing the stop line and the light is red. So I think in part of the comment, and I don't know how those cameras are set up, but the citation I looked at was the shutter snapped, the car had passed the stop line, light was red. Well, that follows with the sergeant's comment, and I'm not putting words in her mouth. If it's yellow, I don't think the photograph snaps.
To be continued.
Well, and my son paid the citation.
I'm glad he had,
He
I'm
said,
glad.
"No, Dad."
I'm glad he had a good lawyer.
No, he said, "No, Dad." And I go, the car's in my name. I think you get to pay that. He wasn't asking me for legal advice. I haven't breached the attorney-client privilege.
Sergeant, I appreciate your comments about, and you didn't say it this way, what are we supposed to do about it? Because that intersection is so busy, that particular one, that I don't know how or where a police car or a motorcycle could be in any position to do anything to stop anybody without making things a lot worse than they are already.
Let's go back on your comment, Mr. Steed. Were you saying that the pedestrian was in the crosswalk? I'm just going back on your comment. Pedestrian's in the crosswalk, parks, crosses on a yellow and completes on red. And that was the problem because the pedestrian was in the crosswalk.
No, my understanding, the way I read this email, was the pedestrian was walking north to south from the Jackson's service station across Overland. The traffic I saw when I parked right there where he would have started and watched was moving north to south, so parallel to him.
Okay.
I think some of his comments have to do with the fact that cars are making a right-hand turn south to west against the red light, which is legal in Idaho if you stop first, the way I believe it is. But they were California stopping it, rolling it. That would be scary to me as a pedestrian. I'd want to make sure I had eye contact with somebody and they were not going to move and they were looking at me before I stepped off there. I think his comments, and I'm putting words in his mouth, were those cars that I saw still in the intersection when it went red were running the red light, which the sergeant says they weren't. And you can only look at two directions sitting on one corner of this thing. I sat over on the other corner at Walgreens a little bit and couldn't see a whole lot going on. Anyway, it's interesting. Like I tell Transportation Commission members and have for years, you're amazed what you can learn if you go out and park.
Well, I dare to say on my ride home tonight or to the Y, I will see at least one car go through a full red light. Because the signals are timed, they don't turn simultaneously. People have learned that there's pause.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lancaster.
So I'd like to add a few comments to this. So including based on what Mr. Ballard just said. So there is some engineering behind all of this, behind signal timing, right? So there, we call yellow change interval and red clearance, or so when all phases are red, call that red clearance. Okay, so in effect, yellow is the same as green. Okay, yellow doesn't mean stop. Yellow means there's a change about to happen. That's what yellow means, right? And that's an engineered time. It's based on some factors, some deceleration, grade of the intersection, that sort of thing. So it's an engineered number. Same with red clearance. So as Commissioner Ballard just said, there is a time when all phases are red. And that is for, as Sergeant Smith described, so if a vehicle enters the intersection, meaning crosses the stop line, as that signal turns red, okay? Time is given for that vehicle to clear the intersection before a conflicting movement is given green, okay? So that's an engineered time. So it's supposed to clear the intersection of all vehicles before any conflicting movements are supposed to be allowed to go. So there is engineering behind all this. So, you know, if you think that a signal is red more than half the time, it's because it is. All signals are always red more than half the time, okay? Yeah, so there is science, there is engineering behind all of that. And that's why you know, even with red light running, you don't see crashes very often because there's engineered time into all of that. So there's my quick engineering tutorial for what it's worth.
I'll bring you the photograph of when I have the green light and I gotta wait for the red car trying to clear the intersection.
Yeah, well, is there a crash?
Now because I'm
Yeah,
watching.
right. So there you go. No harm done.
Okay. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items on our future meeting topics. Look forward to those. We added at least 2 more today in case staff and agency people can give us additional information on a couple of them. That is all I have. Anyone else? Mr. Hood, I see your hand, sir. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, this came up just last week at council, and I think it'd be good for the Transportation Commission. I haven't talked to Mindy. I may invite her back, or maybe this is something for Mr. Wasson, but queuing analysis. She actually mentioned it in her TIS, but drive-throughs, the city's looking at drive-throughs and what our drive-through standards should be, and if they should vary for coffee shops and chicken places and hamburger places with a cult following versus just your average chain. And so we're trying to figure all that out. And some of it, and I'm not putting them on the spot now because I think this is a future meeting topic, but is just when does a CHD or ITD, when is the warrant met or the trigger to say, give us that queuing analysis? Again, Mindy mentioned it. We may not ask for a full-blown traffic impact study, but a queuing analysis when you get 2 drive-throughs near each other. Is that just anytime there's 2 driveways near each other, or is it when there's only so much stacking and they're near each other and an arterial or a collector or a local? So we're trying to understand that, and I think it'd be good to vet some of that through this body. What those, understanding first when that trigger is met at the highway district or ITD to require that of a developer when they're looking at a drive-through, and then take a recommendation for, should that be the city's threshold? Do we want to set the bar higher or lower than that? Are we okay with what they're proposing for those thresholds for that queuing analysis to ensure we don't get traffic backing up onto public roadways? So if you're okay with that, I'd like to pencil that in somewhere.
I wouldn't mind hearing that. I would like to hear it cast in terms of how it's done now and what issues are seen, bringing up the reason to want to talk about how might it be done better. So in that vein. Anyone else? Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion from Mr. Ballard.
Second.
Mr. Lewis has a second. Non-discussable. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you all.